All right, beautiful. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Metzia Daf Chaf Aleph, but we're starting at the second of the wide lines, 3/4 of the way down on Chaf Amud Beis. As you can see on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, we're ending our first parak, and we're starting a famous next parak, one that many of us learned in 6th grade or 5th grade if you went to more firm places. And very practical halachos. We see this a lot. The OU is working on a Hashava Saveda initiative, like a national one where you can put things in. It's kind of cool. Okay, let's get started. Says the Gemara, quoting from our Mishnah, imahen simponos. We had said that if there were simponos, and we learned the other day that simponos is a shover, it's a receipt. So then you have to follow whatever the simponos say. The Gemara says, Yaseh mashe besimponos. The receipt is the final machriya. If you see a receipt, the receipt says the truth. And then the Gemara quotes an Amora who seems to go against our Mishnah, and we're going to ask literally 5 questions in a row on this shita. The shita is like this: 3 lines into the wide lines on Chaf Amud Beis. Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav Simpon hayotze mitachas yedei malve. That if a receipt falls from the hands of the malve, from the one who did the lending, even if it's in his own handwriting, it's nothing more than games, and it is puzzled. We assume that the shover is incorrect, and he is still able to collect, even if the shover says paid. And we're going to see why that's the case right now. I don't want you to think, says the Gemara, that we're talking about the sofer, because there, safra isramile v'kasav. I was walking down the street. I'm the malve. I haven't gotten paid back yet, but I wanted the sofer to write me a receipt because Yaakov owes me $10,000. The second I see Yaakov, I want his cash and I want to give him a receipt right away. So if I have a receipt that's prepared, lav dafka, does that mean that I got paid? It might mean that I could be getting paid if I bump into Yaakov at the right time. But that's true not only of the sofer, ela afilu kasu b'chsav yado, even in his own handwriting puzzle. Savar, why would the shovar not be worthwhile? Namely, why could the malva still collect? Because savar dilma misrami v'asi ben hashmashos v'kaparli. Forget about the sofer. Maybe he's going to come over on Erev Shabbos right before Shkia with a bunch of cash. And lo yehivnale, and if I don't give him a receipt, lo yahiv li zuzi, and therefore he won't pay me back. Therefore, echtov ana, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write, I'll have a receipt ready and waiting. And therefore we don't trust him at all. So this line of Rav goes against what we just learned in our Mishnah. The Mishnah at the open of today's daf, 2 lines down, which quoted our Mishnah, is that the receipt is the final say. Rav says the receipt is not the final say. Now, Rav is an Amora, and we could have in theory answered Rav Tanahu Upalik. That is not what the Gemara answers, because it's not a machlokas. There are just different cases where we do say the receipt is final, and other cases where we do not say that the receipt is final. Let's go through the 5 questions. Here's question number 1, 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom of Chaf Amud Beis. It's 9. We learned in a Mishnah. This is simple. This is what our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah told us a blot ago, an Amud ago, on Chaf Amud Aleph, our Mishnah told us that the receipt is final. So how, Rav, can you say that it's not final? And then maybe you just wrote the receipt because maybe I'll bump into the person who owes me money, and maybe, and therefore we say the shover, the simponos are not valid. Says the Gemara, Kedamar of Safra Shenimtza Ben Shtaros Kruin. We found this particular receipt among some torn documents, and therefore it has less credibility. Maybe it too should have been torn up. Maybe it was a pile of garbage, so it's a little bit less credible. But because we had that answer elsewhere, we're going to see where we had that answer soon. Therefore, hachanami, we would have said the same thing, that shematzu ben shtaros kruin, that perhaps the reason why we're dealing with this sheet of Rav is because we're talking about a receipt that's found among other pieces of paper that are torn. And Tashma, here's question number 2 on Rav. Nimtza le'echad ben shtarosav. Let's say that you find the document among your documents, and what it says is Shtaro shel Yosef ben Shimon Parua. The document of Yosef ben Shimon. Yosef ben Shimon is our Ploni Almoni. He's our John Doe, so your classical name. That Yosef ben Shimon is Parua. He's all paid up. So the halacha is in this brisa, and this brisa is going to be found later in Maseches Bava Basra. Shtaros shnehen pruin. That even if there were 2 Shtaros shel Yosef, they are going to be considered to be paid. So what we see over here is that the receipt is final against Rav again. The Gemara says, "Kid Amar of Safra shenimtza ben shtaros kruen hachanami shenimtzos ben shtaros kruen." It could be that that document is that Rav, is talking about something else. Rav could be talking about shtaros kruen. And our third question, 3 lines from the bottom, Tashma. If children say, Shvua shelo paktanu Abba, our father did not give us any instructions. Vishalo Amar lanu Abba, our father did not tell us anything. Vishalo matzanu bein shtarosav shel Abba shishtar ze parua, and we didn't find anything about that document having been paid. And what's implied from here is that had it been that there was a document among my father's documents that it had been paid, then we would have said that the receipt is final. Again, kasha number 3 against Rav. All the while, we're still teaching that perhaps we're dealing with a case of Rav with shtaros kruin. That brings us to our fourth question on the bottom line of Chafam Beis. Tashma, the Brisa writes, and this Brisa can be found in Maseches Sanhedrin as well. I'm a little scared of that Masechta, by the way.
Big fat Mishnah after the Bava.
It's a scary one. So I don't know if it's as hard as the Bavas, is it? Sanhedrin? What? You can teach Sanhedrin. I will take a little hiatus. I won't actually. I won't. No, I'm going to LA in a couple of weeks again. But Tashma, Simpon Sheyeshalav Edim. If you have a receipt that has Edim, Yiskaim Bechosama, then it's validated with its signatures. Now this seems a little bit odd. Ema. So what would Rav say about this? We see that the Simpon is valid because of the Edim. Ema Yiskaim Mechosamav, not Bechosamav. Maybe what we would say is that we're talking about it's fulfilled from its signatures. Perhaps turning to the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, that we'll just ask. We'll ask the Eidim if it's paid or not. So therefore, that's also not a kasha. And last question on Rav is question number 5. Tashma. Simpon sheyeshalav Eidim kosher. If the receipt has Eidim on them, so then it's kosher. Says the Gemara, my Eidim. Ede Kiyum. Perhaps what Rav can say is that we're talking about Ede Kiyum. The Gemara agrees with this. Hachanami mistabra, that we're talking about Ede Kiyum. Ede Kiyum are the ones who say that this document is valid. They're not the signatures on the document. They're the people who say that the signatures on the document are valid. And Hachanami mistabra, that this is true, midikatani, because we have a brisa, we have in the brisa later, Seifa, v'she'ein alav Edom puzzle, that if there are no Edom on it, it's puzzle. So it says the Gemara, what do you mean if there are no Edim that it's possible? That's obvious. My Eina love Edim. Ilema deleka iluya Edim klal tzricha lemeimar de pasal. If you want to say that what we're talking about is where there are no Edim at all on the shover, pasha that's not kosher. That's obvious. Elalav, there are regular signatures. What we're talking about over here, when it says Eina love Edim klal, that it's possible, that means that if there's no Ede kiyum, but pasha that there are already Edim on there. And the last case of the perek, of a very long and difficult perek in Shas, of perek Shnaim Ochsen, reads like this. We just learned Gufa, Simpon Sheishel of Edim Yiskaim Bechosama. We saw this on the very bottom line. This was question number 4 against Rav on the bottom of Chaf Amud Beis. We had said that if there are Edim on the Simpon on the receipt, Yiskaim Bechosama, that we would verify it with its signatures. Ein alav Edim. If there were no Edim, Vigyotze mitachas yidei shlish, and the document fell from a third party, from a trusted third party, Oshiyotze la'achar chitum shtaros kasher, or it came out from the signatures of shtaros, of other documents, kasher. So says the Gemara, Yotze mitachas yidei shlish. Why is it that if it came out of the person's hands of a shlish that he would be trusted? Because to hahemne malve l'shlish, because the malve obviously trusted that person to give that document over. You don't give over a document for receipt unless you're really trusting of the person you're giving it to. Yotze la'achar chitum shtaros nami dilav depriya, had it not been paid, lo hava meira le'lishtari, wouldn't ruin his chances of collecting that money back. And that's how we explain that brisa, which again originated on the very bottom line of Chaf Amud Beis, and we just brought it back up here with the Gufa. Hadron Allah Shnaim Ochsim Yiratzim. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. We're now starting the next parak of Elu Metzia Shalom. The Mishnah opens with a dichotomy. Elu Metzia Shalom ve'elu Chayav l'Hachris. There are some items that you find that they're just yours. There's no requirement to do chazara. So they're just yours. If you find them, they're yours. One of the best examples of this happens in my house all the time. I'll find a $20 bill lying around somewhere. I don't know whose it is. The truth is, as the owner of the house and as the dad, it really doesn't matter whose it is. It's mine. It's kind of cute when my kids say, oh, I'll spend my money on that item. I'm like, that's wonderful. Yeah, you're going to spend your money that I gave you. That's great. So it says the Gemara, Elu Metzia Shelo. There are some things we get to keep. The Elu Chayav Lahachris, and there are also some things where we are obligated to be machris to make an announcement. Now today, and really for much of the next many blot, we're only focusing on the Metzia Shelo part, on that which you can keep. That which you're Chayav Lahachris is in another Mishnah. This also brings us back to a historical point when all the Mishnayos were really larger chunks of text, not like we have them broken down here or in the Kahati. And sometimes actually you see a difference between the Kahati and Shas, where a Mishnayos over here might be put together or not, and in Kahati it might be put together or not. So good to know historically that when we say Mishnah Perek X, Mishnah Y, Lav Dafka, that's the pagination as to how it was in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. I doubt he was the one who organized it like that. He probably put them all in a Masechta and just wrote.
Could be the Prakim, maybe, or thing.
Prakim, maybe,
But
maybe.
not seen beyond.
Just imagine in his head, like there's no Gemaras, it's just Mishnayos. He's the first one writing, so he had to be Masader by topic, l'chorah, right? And there was no Maseches Brachos yet. So like what,
Right.
What happened in his head? Like how did we get to where we are? We know the material's right, but like how do we? And even that sometimes we have questions about with, different dialects and nuschos acheros and kisvei yad. Last night was huge. That was really anomalous. Let's jump in. Elu Metzias Shelo says in Mishnah Matzah Peiros Mefuzarin. You find fruits that are spread out. We're not talking about in someone's private property. That makes you a trespasser and a thief. That's not what we're talking about. Ma'os Mefuzaros, money doesn't have any simanim. Money typically is considered to be mefuzar, or I should say money that is mefuzar is considered to be yours. Krichos Birshus Harabim, Rashi says, Omarim Ktanim, small piles of things in a public domain. Ve'igule dvela, these particular types of cakes, these pressed fig cakes, and kikaros shel nachtom, bread that's made by the bakery. So this is a great distinction. If you go to someone's house for Shabbos and they make their own challahs, they look different than the Shalom bakery challahs that you buy at Jewel. They look different. There's an industrial look to the ones that you buy at the bakery. So that's the nachtom. You'll never be able to know whose that is. You'll never know. But if you go to someone's house, I know I recognize my mom's challah, I recognize my sister's, and I recognize my wife's challahs. I can tell who's more OCD in the braiding. I know who's who. I can tell. I'm not going to say who's who. I'm not going to tell you who, but I'm not putting my marriage on the line. So the Gemara says that kikaros shel nachtom, those are obviously going to be shalo. You can keep those. Machrozos shel dagim, if there are strings of fish. Let's say we actually do this when we go fishing. We have a way to keep fish on a line. You put a thing through their gill and keep them on a line. So taught my dad back in the 80s when we first started fishing. V'chatichos shel basar, if you have cuts of meat and you don't know, there's no identifying marks. V'gizei tzemer halakuchen mimedinasan, and the shearings of wool that are taken mimedinasan from their estates. Rashi over here says immediately to the right where we are, mimedinasan kamos shehin gizuzos kishar kol gizos hamadina. La'afuki habos mi beis ha'uman kiktani seifa. We're not talking about a finished product. My sweater is made out of wool. It doesn't make it yours. If you found a pile of wool, no problem. You find a finished product, I'm going to charge you for my sweater. That's what the Gemara says. V'anitze pishtan, when you have strings of flax. Ulashonos shel argaman, and you have these little swaths of material of argaman, of purple dyed wool. Hare elu shelo, and divrei Reb Meir, though the words divrei Reb Meir are subject to a machlokas rishonim, the Rush removes it. So if you look in the footnotes on the side, the Gemara says B'Gemara Yerushalmi v'Rush leisa lahanach gimel tevos divrei Reb Meir. So we're not 100% sure that this is Shitas Reb Meir. Either way, the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kol sheyesh bo shinui chayav lahachris. If the item has any uniquenesses to them, any changes, things that aren't simple like they used to be, or like we would have thought it would have been, then you're obligated to be machris. Ketzad, matzah igul uvesocho cheres. Let's say that you have an eagle, you have your little cake, but there's a piece of pottery in it. So the piece of pottery could be an identifier. It could be, you also could just be a very messy cook, but maybe that alone is enough of an identifier to say that there's a shinui. What's that?
Might be someone's teeth.
Could be someone's tooth, although what's your tooth doing in the dough,
No, you eat it. You
No,
break
this
your
is
teeth.
not talking about that. We're saying you found it. You're looking and you see a piece of pottery sticking out.
Make sense,
Oh.
which is fixed pressed together.
Yeah.
No.
Well, one way or the other, it doesn't matter, but we're not talking about after someone eats it. We just find it sitting there. Or how about kikar uvaso chamos? We have shlisel challah. So like if you have a challah and it's shaped like a key, that's a shinui. That's already a very big shinui and super identifiable. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer kol kli anpuria ein chayav lahachris. We will not be learning what an anpuria is today. Rashi just tells us the Gemara mefarish la and points us to Daf Chav Gimel, which is in a couple of days. What? In Puraya. Oh. Well, I do remember that from last time. Oh, gosh, I don't remember I think the last time I learned this was sixth grade. I learned the Mishnah with my.
Remember from sixth grade.
Yeah, sure. I don't believe you, but it's fine. Says the Gemara as it opens halfway down on Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph, Matzah Peros Mefuzar Vekama. This is a bit of a math equation for those of you who are math oriented. What is the spacing when we say that it's mefuzar, when it's spread out? This is such a Jewish thing. It's spread out. How much is it spread out? The comma says the Gemara Amar Yitzchak kav be'arba amos. When you have a volume of a kav of fruit that's spread out over an area of arba amos. Let's say 4 by 4. Is it a circle? Is it a square? Ayin in the Rishonim, your marviach es azavios, which we had from Maseches Shabbos. All the different. I don't know. I'm just saying these are not for us to discuss now. It says the Gemara, well, hey chidami, iderach nefila. Who cares about the ratio of the kav of fruits to the 4 square amos, or the 16 square, the 4 by 4, the 16 square amos? Who cares? Iderach nefila. If it's obvious that it looks like that they just fell on their own, afilu tuvanami. Who cares how big it is? And iderach hinuach. And if I put it down and it's clear that I put it down very carefully, they're in a basket or they're organized perfectly, like when you go into Jewel and all of the apples are in a perfect triangle, and then one yutz pulls out the one from the bottom because that's the one that he likes, No, there afilu tuvanami, afilu batzer mihachinami. Even if it's less than that, you have no right to take it. None. That's obviously not yours. So Amar of Ukva Bar Chama be machnashta de beidari askinan. We're talking about a gathering at the beidari. The beidari was the granary. That was a place where people brought their grains to be threshed. Not everybody had ground flour like we have it. You had to bring it to the mill, and you'd have animals attached to the arm of the mill. They'd be walking around. So then if somebody leaves something over there, you intentionally left it over there. Then the Gemara says, Kav, under those circumstances of Machnashta Beidari, where there's a pile left by the Beidari, there the Gemara says, Kav be'arba amos de nafish tirchayu. If you have a Kav and it's spread out over 4 amos, so then that's a lot of work to do. And lo tarach inish v'lo hadar asi v'shakilahu. It's kind of like cutting your losses. Like my arms are full, my hands are full. I got all my stuff, and I look behind me, and there's like a kav, but it's spread out over, let's say, 6 feet by 6 feet. I'm cutting my losses. Okay, shouldn't I lost a couple dollars of it? That's worth it to me, and therefore that's why our Mishnah says that in that case you're allowed to take it. However, says the Gemara, and therefore afkure mafkir luhu. Then your intent is to no longer own it, just to be mafkir, and that's why if I find it at the beidari, machnashta beidari, then I can keep it. However, batzir mehachi, if the spacing of the kav is less than 4 by 4, then tarach v'hadar asi v'shakilu. The average person would care about that loss because it's not such a tircha to pick it up. Below mafkir luhu, and he would not be mafkir. And that's the difference in regards to the ratio. That's where the numbers come in. So a kav of produce over an area of up to 4 amos, that we care about. More than 4 amos, we don't care. Then the person would be mafkir. Now the Gemara asks about 8 questions that will all end in a teiku on the very last line. And they're all basically mathematical types of questions based on the ratios. And the Gemara says as follows, 2/3 of the way down on Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph. By Rav Yirmiyah, if we started out with a kav to 4 amos ratio, what would be chatzi kav b'shtei amos mahu? What if we had only half of a kav over a smaller space, right? Ratio is the same. It's still 1 to 4. it's either 1-4 or 1/2 to 2, which is also 1-4 ratio. How do we look at that ratio? Do we say kav be'arba amos time amai mishum de nafish tirchayu? Did we say, like we said earlier, that 4 amos is just too big of a space? And chatzi kav b'shtei amos kaven de lo nafish tarchay lo mafkir lahu. And since 2 amos, even though the ratios are the same, but since 2 amos, I could basically kneel down and reach everything in one reach. So then lo mafkir lahu, then I'm not going to be mafkir that, even though the ratios are identical. Odilma mishum de lo chashivi, because it's not so chashiv, it's such a tiny amount, it's half of a kav. The chatzi kav b'shtei amos kaven de lo chashivi mafkir lahu. So that's question number 1. So we looked at the ratio of 1-4 and then said, what about 1/2 to 2, which is the same ratio? Now let's go in the other direction. Do you have a question?
I just said if it's 4 squared amos versus 2 squared amos, then it's not really the same ratio.
It's true. It's true. It's an exponent. That's true. So what is it? It's 1. It's 1-16. It's 1-16. No, it's 1-16. It's 1 kav to 16 square amos. And then the same thing would be 0.5 to 2 square amos. That's 4. That's not 16 though. That's 1/8. Ratios change per square footage. That's true. It's a very good point. Maybe that's what the Gemara meant. And now we're going to take it in the other direction. The Gemara says 15 lines or so from the bottom. Kabayim bishmona amos mahu. What if we have a double portion of a kav, but the area in which it is spread out is also bigger? It's not 4x4, but it's 8x8. Do we say kav ba'arba amos time amay mishum denafish tirchayu v'kol sheken kabayim b'shmona amos? This is an even bigger space. If it's all about tircha, then I certainly, if I didn't want to walk and clean up a 4x4 space, I certainly don't want to walk and clean up an 8x8 space. Kevin denafisha tarchayu tfei mafkir. And because it's more than 4x4 and it's 8x8, I'll be mafkir. Odoma mishum delo chashivi, or no, because the contents don't really matter. V'kabayim b'shmona amos kevin de chashivi, but 2 kabayim is a lot of food, and since 2 kabayim is a lot, kevin de chashivi lo mafkir, but we don't know. Says the Gemara. Good. Let's change our product. Kav shumshimin. Yikes! Sesame seeds are tiny. Oh my gosh! If you're in the sale of sesame seeds, you're willing to lose millions of sesame seeds. This is just the way things are. They're very small. So kav shumshimin ba'arba amos mahu. Would we attribute the same rules of kav to arba amos if that kav was a very, very tiny product? Salt, shumshimin, peppercorns, everything tiny that you can think of that we would buy. Do we say kar ba'aba amos time amai mishum de lo chashivi v'shumshimin kevan de chashivi lo mafkir lahu? That really it's still too chashiv. The shumshimin was a little bit more of a commodity back in the day. Because it's so difficult to pick up every little sesame seed. The kol sheken shumshimin kevan de nafish tirchai u'tfei mafkir lahu. Maybe he would be. Don't know. Says the Gemara, another question, 5 lines from the bottom. Kav tamre ba'arba amos. You have a kav of dates in a 4x4 space. Kav rimone ba'arba amos mahu. Or if you have a kav of pomegranate, super easy to pick up. I was in Eretz Yisrael in May and we walked by a pomegranate tree. These things are like, I don't know, they're like a hard softball size. They're easy to pick up. Just they fit perfectly in your hand. Kav ba'arba amos time amai. Would we argue in regards to the rimon and in regards to the dates that mishum telo chashivi, but kav tamre ba'arba amos, kav rimone ba'arba amos nami, kevin telo chashivi mafkir. Who these fruits were all over the place. They weren't considered chashuv. They're halachically considered chashuv. Ad kedei kach that the poskim write that if you have multiple fruits of Eretz Yisrael, there's a seder following the pasuk, which one you'd make a bracha on first. So whatever the pasuk is first, I don't know what it is. What's the first? Chita osara gefen verimon. Keina. All right, one day I'll be a balkori. I'm not. It's
Huh?
The first one.
Yeah.
And that's long.
Oh, Dilma, would we say no? We say mishum denafish tirchayu. That really our concern about the arba al arma was that it's a lot of work. But these types of foods are not a lot of work. It's very easy to pick up rimonim. My mother-in-law bought one of my kids a puzzle with 1,408 pieces. I'm like, what are you doing to me? You're making me work right now, you know? So when that's nafish terchayu, the Lego pieces that I buy for my children are like the massive, like styrofoam, 8 blocks in a pack, Shalom Al Yisrael. We organize our cabinet for our toys, smallest pieces at the top, biggest pieces at the bottom. So then it came into lo nafish tercha lo mafkir lumai. All of these questions are teku. We have no idea, and there's so many iterations of this that really could play out lemaisa. Although again, most of this is machnash to beidari. We're talking about a threshing floor. It's a little bit doesn't always come up, but it could come. That brings us to one of the well-known machlokos between Abaye and Rava. Itmar, turning to the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Yeush Shalom Das. Oi, if there is Yeush and the person doesn't know that he will be Miyash, that's what Rashi points out. Rashi says, Dibur Hamaschel Yeush Shalom Das, Davar Shestamo Yeush, Lechasheyeda, Shanafal Mimenu, Uchshematzao, Adain Lo Yadu Habaylam Shanafal Mimenu. Let's say I drop $1. Okay. I didn't know I dropped $1, but you found my dollar. You watched it happen. I got into a cab right away and I'm gone. Okay. But you saw it's mine. So it's Yesh Shalom Midas. I would for sure be Miyash, but I didn't notice yet. In that interim phase, can I take your item? Can I keep your item? Because in order for me to keep your item, as we saw on the previous page, you need hefker, or you need Yesh, you need something. There has to be some halachic transaction that makes it no longer yours. So how do we look at that? The Gemara says, Abaye Amar lo have Yesh. Abaye says that it is not considered Yeush. Your lack of knowledge that you lost the item means it's still in your rishus. However, Rava Amar have Yeush. Rava looks down. Yored l'sof daito shel adam. I know that when you get home, you're going to count your dollars and you're going to see that you no longer have that dollar, and retroactively, unlike Abaye, Rava says retroactively, down to this moment, it's considered as though it's not yours anymore. It's Yeush, and therefore I can keep it. Machlokes Abaye Rava, one of the Ya'al Kigams, it's the Yud in Ya'al Kigam, which is Yeush Shalom Midas, that we paskin like Abaye and not like Rava. And says the Gemara, B'davar sheyesh bo simin kulei amalo pligi de lo have yesh. When we're dealing with something that's unique, nothing to talk about, that's no, everyone agrees. Even Abaye who would say, even Rava who would say that there is Yeush, he would not say it in a case where there are Simon. Even if later we heard the guy say about his customized AirPods Pro that say on them, Phil's AirPod Pros, there might be a day where I give up on them. That's possible. But even if I articulate in a year from now, I'm so upset that I lost them, lo have Yeush. Because you stole them effectively. There were simanim there. You're not allowed to keep it. Because when we recognize that, in fact, when I recognize that I lost my AirPods, I was not miyash because there are simanim. What was my argument? Meimar Amar Simona Isli Begave. It says my name on them. Yahavna Simna Ushkilnale. I'll announce the simanim. You'll announce the lost item, and we will meet up somewhere, and you'll give me my item back. So there, nobody has an argument. If there are simanim, we don't have the machlokes Abaye and Rava about Yeush Shalom Midas. Yeush Shalom Midas is not there. We'll see soon where it is. Bizuto Shal Yam, when we're dealing with the tides. You're at the beach one day, the tides are low. You leave something there that has no simanim, obviously, because we already precluded simanim. You left a beach towel from Target. It's nothing special. And then it gets swept away by the tides. Uvishliluso Shal Nahar, or at the riverbank. It says the Gemara Chiddush, Afal Gav the East Bay Simon, right? I foreshadowed incorrectly, right? Even if there is a simon, the towel has a big K on it for Karesh. Doesn't matter. Rachamana Sharia. The Torah allows that, Kidiba'in and Lameimar, Lakaman, like we'll learn later on. So these are cases where we do not have the machlokes Abaye v'Rava. Ki pligi v'davar she'ein bo simon. The only time we have a machlokes is when there is no simon on the lost item. Abaye Amar lo hava yeush, dehalo yoda denafal minei. Abaye says you can't unown something if you don't know that you dropped it. You can't do that. If I drop $1, it doesn't mean that I don't own it. I still own it. I just dropped it. So Abaye is not willing to shake. Rav Amar have yeush because when he will find out, and he will, presumably, when he finds out, Meimar Amar Simona Leisle Begabe. It has to do miyash. Because when there is no siman, the second I know that I lost the item, I'm done for.
What happened there?
I don't know the answer to this question, but when it comes to Shitas Rava, when Rava says that there is Yeush, is it a condition that there will be a day in the future that you have to know about it in order for me to take it today? It doesn't seem that way. Rava seems to say you could just take it. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that. Rava just seems to say it's yours. He's checked out. It's an automatic Yeush. And Abaye says no. Abaye says there's no automatic Yeush. And we're not talking about a tide. We're not talking about a storm. We're not talking about an overflowing bank. That's ridiculous. I was in Camp Shai this year. Jay Kune was just sitting here. They were on a boat. He was wearing his like nice glasses, and their kids were tubing. And the cord, the rope holding onto them hit him in the face and took his glasses and dropped him into the bottom of the lake, of Lake Delton. There is a 0% chance he's getting those glasses back. But there are simanim, they have his prescription, he has a receipt, but ABC 100%. That's tidal waves. That's already not coming back. And if you want to be a scavenger and put on a wetsuit and go get it, Zygazut, it's all yours, no problem. Because he was Miyash on the spot. The second it happened, he's like, what am I going to do? I'm blind now. I'm going to go dive blind and go find my... It's Pasha that's Yehush. It has to be that Rava means Yehush, even if there is no future date. I presume. I could be wrong, but I presume that's what it means. Then the Gemara has a very unique siman. Siman, Pamgash, Mimak Giti, and Kikaaz. It doesn't matter how you pronounce it, because it's just one letter each for every question we're going to ask. Some in favor of Rava, some in favor of Abaye. And this will end, not today, but tomorrow at the bottom of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. So that does kind of give us a little bit of comfort of knowing exactly what's going to happen for the next many lines. Today, we're going to go through 7 questions, and then we're going to stop at the top of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Question number 1, a quarter of the way down. Tashma, Peiros Mefuzarin. The Peiros are Mefuzar. We don't know if he knows that. Hello, Yada Denafamine. This guy doesn't know that he's got a hole in the back of his truck. You ever see those trucks driving and like dirt's like flowing out the back? They don't know. They can't see. This guy has apples falling out of the back of his truck. Hello, Yada Denafamine. And yet, what did our Mishnah say? That they are shalom. Who is that a kasha on? So that is a kasha on Abaye. Hello, Yada Denafamine, and they're still his. That's a kasha on Rava. Because here it's lo yada, and that's a kasha on Abaye. A kasha on Abaye. So says the Gemara, how do we answer that? Ha'amar of ukva bar chama hacha b'machnashta debei dari. The language is corrected on the side. B'machnashta debei dari askinu da'avei demidasi. He knew he left it there, so that's how he got out of it. Question 2, Tashma maos mefuzaros hare elu shalo. We said that if there are coins spread out, that they belong to whoever finds them. Amai, halo yada dinafalmine kashan abai. He doesn't know. Hasamnami kid Rav Yitzchak to Amar Adam Asui lemashmesh bekisa b'chol shavasha. People check their money all the time. Hachanami, we learned elsewhere. We're going to see where that marimakum is soon. But here too, we would apply the same rule. That in this brayse about maos mefuzaros, a person is hachanami Adam Asui lemashmesh bekisa b'chol shavasha. Question 3, Tashma. It's that's a cell phone to check our bank, or that we're watching our cell phone?
Everything.
Yeah, there's an age, there's like an age where people don't know that they've lost their phone, which is beautiful. Like you won't see your phone for an hour. We're not like that. But there are people out there who won't know where their phone is for an hour, and they'll be like, wonder where my phone is. Other than Shabbos, we're a bit of a mess. Question 3. Igule dvela v'kikaro shel nachdom. We said in our Mishnah, hare elu shelo. Here too, amai v'halo yada denafalmine. He didn't know that he dropped them. He had no idea. Hasam nami agav diakiri. Here over there, because they're very heavy, they're very dense foods. So then you know if you drop them. Meda yada behu. Question 4. Tashma l'shono shel argamon. These little swaths of cloth that are purple. Hare elu shelo v'amai halo yada denafalmine. And here we can't say they're heavy. It's just very expensive, very light cloth. It's like losing a silk tie. You won't know if it fell out of your suitcase. Hasam nami agav chashidi, because they're very important. Mishmushe memashmesh behu uchad Rabbi Yitzchak. Similar to Rabbi Yitzchak, like we saw above, of memashmesh bekisa b'chol shavasham. Question 5. Hamotze mos bevate kinesios bevate midrashos b'chol makom sherav mitzim sham hare elu shalom mipnei shabayim misyashin mehem. Ay v'halo yada denafalmine. You lost your money in shul, in a base medrash, anywhere where people are walking around. You can keep it. If you find that money, you can keep it. Why? They're miyayish. What do you mean they're miyayish? They didn't even know they dropped the money. Says the Gemara. Question 6. Tashma, 2/3 of the way down. When do we assume that others, that the poor people, are able to access leket? You can't have everything in my field. I'm allowed to harvest my own field. So who gets the leket? So says the Gemara, when the last people go through the fields, then everyone's allowed to take it. These are older people who walk with their canes. They have smaller appetites. They don't move quite as fast. They're not as aggressive as the younger aniyim. And once they walk through, it's all done. Reish Lakish Amar Lakute Basar Lakute. After the second round of collecting, Machlokas Amorai. Ve'amai. I understand what you're saying, but that's only true for aniyim that live over here. But ika aniyim beduchta achrisa dulo miyashe. I'm in West Rogers Park, but the poor people over in Skokie might want to come over and come see if I have any food left over. Says the Gemara Amri, Kevan de ika aniyim hacha. Hanach meikara ayushe miyayish. That the poor people in Skokie are not coming to West Rogers Park to my field because they know that there's poor people in my neighborhood. They're not gonna schlep. They know that somebody already chopped up my field. And hanach meikara miyayish ve'amre aniyim dehasa malaktele. That those aniyim already collected everything. Question 6. Only 2 more for the day. Toshma ketzios baderach, dried figs. They're called ketzios because the way they would dry them was they would cut right by where the connection point, and a lot of the liquids would ooze out. It's not just dried like grapes. Ve'afilu b'tzad sadek ketzios, even if it's next to a field of other dried figs. V'chein te'ena hanota laderech, that's hanging over the path. U'matzah te'enim tachteha, you have a branch that's hanging over and dates underneath. Mutaros mishum gezel, you can eat them. And not only that, u'pturos mina meiser. However, bezeisim uvicharubim, when it comes to olives and when it comes to carobs, the din is usher. And there's an internal stira within this brisa. In the Reisha, you said it's mutter mishum gezel. In the Sefer, you said that you're chayiv mishum gezel. Very odd. Bishlama Reisha, I understand the Reisha where it says that it's mutter mishum gezel. Abaye lo kasha agav dechashivi mimashmesh buhu. I could understand according to Abaye that you're always checking, you're always making sure that it's there. So because you're always checking, if some of them fall, they're mutter to eat. Te'ena nami made a yudia denatra. I would have known if a date fell off of my property. Ela seifa the Rava kasha. The problem of the seifa that the zeisim and charuvim are aser, that is a kasha for Rava. Tekatani bezeisim and charuvim aser. So what is the kasha over here? Rava is of the opinion that yeush shalamidas have a yeush. Well, if yeush shalamidas is yeush, then why are the zeisim and charuvim aser? So says the Gemara, the reason why Amar Rabbi Abo mishum shiny zayis hold v'chazusa mochiachalav. When you look at an olive that is below an olive tree, you could just look up at the olive tree and see where it came from, right? You can't just take anything that falls. You can also tell the size, the color, the texture. You can look at the olive and say it's just like the ones above. Pashat that this olive fell from right there. The Afagav the Natran Zese made the Yadia Duchta the Inish Inishu. But we all know that this is the place where it came from. Obviously, this is where you're not blind. Just look at the context. You see an apple, there's an apple tree. The apple came from the apple tree. That's why the Brisa says you're not allowed to take the Zesim. So it says the Gemara, Hachi Afilu Reshanami, but the same should be true with the dates. Why did you say that the dates are Mutaros Mishum Gezel? That doesn't make any sense. Why are the dry not dates, the figs? Why are the figs in the Brisa Mutaros Mishum Gezel? I also know that they came from the fig tree. So we made the following odd distinction, that if a fig falls from a fig tree, it's mutter. If an olive falls from an olive tree, it's aser. Why? Amar Rav Papa, te'ena im nefilasanim esas. When a fig falls off of a tree, it instantly becomes gross. However, an olive has a pretty good shelf life off the tree. They have a pretty fair integrity. They can last a lot longer. So therefore, when a te'ena falls off a tree, the bailim are miyayish right away. When an olive falls off a tree, the bailim are not miyayish right away, and that's why we make this distinction. Last but certainly not least, tashma. Haganav shenotal mizeh v'nasan lazeh. A ganav takes from here and puts over there. B'chein gazlan shenotal mizeh v'nasan lazeh. A ganav and a gazlan, both of them. V'chein yarden shenotal mizeh v'nasan lazeh. The Jordan River, or as Rashi points out, v'chein sha'ar neharos v'tana zeh al hayarden hayayoshev. The Tana who authored this brisa lived near the Jordan River. So the Gemara says, Mashanatal natal, Mashanasa nasan. Wherever the items land, the storm, the hurricane took your car and put it in. Well, a car is not a good idea. So took something without simanim, dropped it in my property. It's mine. End of the conversation. Now, Bishlam a gazlan v'yardain. A gazlan is someone who steals out in the open, and the yardain is something obvious, a major weather episode. To kachazi luhu amiyayish. I see that. When I see that happen, I'm instantly miyayish. El ganav who steals in private, mi kachazi le miyayish. If the ganav is a secret guy, he steals in private. So then kasha and abayit. It seems over here that you're miyayish without even knowing about it. Says the Gemara, Tir Gemara Papa belistim mizuyin. The ganav over there actually was listim. He was listim mizuyin. But if that's true, then we have two types of gazlanim. Says the Gemara, Trei Gavne Gazlan. There's two types of gazlanim. That's why really the Bryce at the bottom on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, when it says Hagana, was talking about listim mizuyin, ganav listim mizuyin, and the other one was talking about a regular gazlan. We'll stop right here and continue cheppering Abaye and Rava tomorrow. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Okay.